Turron, Davenport, USA Today, Eagles Wire. You know, many times you come out of the gate thinking, all right, you know, this isn't going to make the season, but you're staring at a tough possibility in week 2. This is a pretty tough spot for Philly, Turron, to start the season off on the road against a division foe.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough one for them. I mean, you look, they lost to the Redskins twice last year. You know, they haven't played well against that team. So going down there and getting a win would really kick the season off to a great start. So I'm sure they're looking to do that. I mean, you only get 16 of them, so you got to make it one count, and that's pretty much the vibe in the building. I mean, the momentum that they generated, you know, in the last game that they had where the starters played is done. You know, everything's over and done with this regular season time. So, you know, that's what they're focused on.
All right. We know that the Eagles had some interesting moves with the 53-man roster. What stood out to you with the makeup of the 53 and the fact that they didn't really do a whole heck of a lot after this? In years past, you know, just making a team didn't mean that you were concretely on it. But it seems like this year, if you made it, you made it.
Yeah, a couple of things stood out. You look at keeping 8 offensive linemen instead of 10. That kind of stood out to me. But I understand because Dylan Gordon played so poorly in that last game that they really they couldn't keep him. So they're going to figure out a way to have that depth on both sides with Big V, you know, playing left tackle and right tackle as a reserve. You got Wisniewski who could give you some tackle snaps there also. But another thing that stood out was keeping 5 running backs. I predicted that they would keep 6 receivers. I was actually the only one to predict that Shelton Gibson will be on the roster out of the guys. John McMullen won the 53-man contest, so I give him credit for that. But, you know, going back to the 5 running backs, you know, that surprised me. I didn't think that Clement was going to make it onto the roster. I thought they would push him to the practice squad. But, I mean, in the end, they kept 5. They kept 6 receivers and 8 offensive linemen, so you have the balance there, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and it seemed that the theme was really the future. Like, there might be guys that weren't good enough to help us this year, but we weren't going to let them go.
Yeah, I mean, it was about developing guys, and Doug Peterson went over his plan for how they're going to do that, and really it's going to be put upon some of the assistant coaches. Like, you look at Dino Vasso, you know, one of the assistant DB coaches. He'll be there to help develop some of the younger DBs, you know, and that'll be his job. So it's really going to be about the assistants. They got to develop guys like Shelton Gibson, you know, Donnell Pumphrey, who probably won't be active on game day, but they still needed to keep them on the roster because I don't think either one would have passed the waivers.
Turron, with that, what is the message for this year's team when maybe they didn't keep the best 53 men?
Well, I think they did keep the best 53 men. I think that Shelton Gibson and Bryce Treggs was a toss-up. I mean, I can't really think of anybody they cut that you could say, oh, well, you know, he outplayed someone else. So I think the message, regardless, and talking to the guys, whether it be Pumphrey or you know, Gibson or any of the guys whatsoever, it's hey, you're one play away. So you have to stay prepared. You have to stay ready. And look at what Jim Schwartz said today, just as far as whatever happened in the preseason is done with. Is now focused on the regular season. So I think really it's stay ready, you know, so that way you don't have to get ready. And it's really just, you know, focus on what's here now.
As that roster was shaping up and you play the shell game we did in the media of who was going to make it and who wasn't and who did they think, you know, you talked about the running back position. You thought they could sneak Corey Clement through to the practice squad. The guys that came out on that practice squad were all guys that basically were part of the cuts except for that quarterback. Do you buy into the fact that they signed that quarterback just because he was with the Washington organization, or do you think there's another reason they signed that quarterback?
Well,
that's Nate Sudfeld, for those of you who are wondering who that quarterback may be.
I'll start with this. I wasn't really impressed with Nate Sudfeld. He's a quarterback that will stare down his receiver. And I watched him at the Shrine Week. You know, he hesitated to let the ball go when you had guys open on post routes, taking a check down instead. But that being said, he fits the body type of 6'5", 220. He's that body type that they seem to like. So he could be a developmental guy. But, I mean, me personally, he's not someone that I would have taken. I honestly, looking at how everything played out, it's kind of funny to me that Alec Torkelson, the former Penn QB, ended up with the Redskins in place of Sudfeld, because Torgerson is the guy I would have taken, or even I would still have looked at Gerard Evans from Virginia Tech, who they had a waived injury settlement with.
Turron Davenport, USA Today, is with us. Turron, what's your anticipation for Derek Barnett right out of the gate? I mean, a lot of times the number one pick we have high hopes for. Should that be seen from week one?
Yeah, I've said it before, and I'll continue to say it. He's the best defensive end, defensive lineman, period, in this draft class. And, you know, when you look at Barnett, I think 6.5 or more sacks is definitely reasonable for him. He's not going to start, but he'll get significant playing time. And that being said, he'll have every opportunity to make plays happen.
Turron Davenport's with us, USA Today. Are you expecting a bounce-back year from Vinny Curry, Turron?
Yeah, I think Curry will have a bounce-back year. He's doing some things to work on his balance, you know, so that way he's not on the ground. And Jim Schwartz spoke highly of him today. I think one of the things that he's able to do is get off the ball really well. He's stout against the run. He's going to be their guy to go against, you know, the left tackles. And I think he's going to have a bounce-back year. And he and Barnett and some of their other lineups are going to split time, and you'll see some good things out of Vinny Curry.
Yeah, and this will be a good test for that group. I mean, Washington, for their flaws, they do have a pretty good offensive line, so we should get a pretty good feel if this Eagles pass rush is upgraded from last year, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, Trent Williams is easily one of the best left tackles in the game, so the defensive ends are going to have their hands full. And Morgan Moses isn't exactly a slouch either. Then you look on the inside, Brandon Sheriff is a guy that has given Fletcher Cox all that he could want. So we'll see how that pans out. That's the matchup, really, I'm going to be watching, Sheriff against Fletcher Cox, because last year Cox did not have the best game against them. But, you know, you're going to have Timmy Jernigan there, so they won't be able to help against Cox as much, because Jernigan can really eat against one-on-one protection.
Turron, what do you expect to see at running back this week? Is that going to be more of a week-to-week thing for Peterson, or do you think he has an idea going into Washington, this is who I'm slotting in for sure, and I'm going to put him in week one and just keep going out with those guys?
Well, I think you're going to get a mix. I really think it's going to be a heavy dose of Wendell Smallwood. I know the coaching staff is very high on him, especially Deuce Staley. And, you know, when you look at it, Smallwood is their most complete running back. He could do some of what everyone on that roster could do. He could catch the ball out the backfield, you know, like Sproles. He could line up in the slot like Pumphrey. He could run with power like Blunt or Clement. So he brings everything. And for me, you know, when you want to go shoe to shoe and just run the football, I think he's someone that would benefit from that. You look at the Steelers game, 17 carries, 79 yards, 1 touchdown. But specifically on that touchdown drive, they just gave him the ball. They kept feeding him, and you saw him really get the feel of the running game. And, you know, you saw him get better with more carries. And that's how he is. I think he's one of those guys that the more you give him the rock, the better he'll be.
Hey, Turron, wide receiver, they upgraded a lot. Obviously, Alshon Jeffrey kind of under the radar in preseason because he didn't play a whole heck of a lot. Same with Torrey Smith. They both scored a touchdown in week 3. But do you anticipate – they threw the ball a lot last year with a lot less. So with adding more, do you anticipate they throw just as much, if not more?
I think they're going to throw a lot. I don't know about 600 attempts for once this year, but, I mean, when I look at some of the things that Frank Reich and Peterson have said repeatedly, they talk about the flow of the game and going where the flow of the game takes them. So I think really I want to see how they react to when they're down 2 touchdowns. You know, the good teams like the Patriots, you know, like the Steelers, they continue to run the football. They continue to establish that, right, and commit to it. I want to see if Doug Peterson and Frank Reich do that, or if they do like they did in Cincinnati, where they just completely abandoned the run. And I understand they had a 21-point deficit, but they still should have at least mixed in more running plays, so this way you keep the defense honest. And that's something that they didn't do in numerous games, and it's clear as day when you have 0 running backs to average, you know, 15 or 20 carries a game, and you can't have that.
Yeah, and Turron Davenport, USA Today, Eagles Wire, Eagles, Redskins this weekend. One thing that you saw in this camp that's a big difference from last year?
You know, I didn't see as much energy, to be honest with you. I think that's where Jordan Matthews really came into play. I mean, he was one of the guys that really supplied that team with energy and kept them going. I didn't see the electricity in camp that I've seen in other camps. So that would be the thing. But, I mean, obviously there was more of Carson Wentz. So, that's another thing that definitely, helped this team as far as their identity is concerned. But I would have to say a lack of energy.
We'll leave you with this one. You were around the last couple of years to see the full roster. More talent clearly on this year's team than last year's team?
Yeah, I think there's more talent. You look at the cornerback position, you have one of the best young corners in Darby. You look at Alshon, who's, a legit receiver, undergoing a body change. Now, I'm going to have an article about that coming out soon. There's just a lot that has happened as far as that team's concerned. I think you put in Blunt and healthy Smallwood, mix in Jernigan. I mean, they're in really good shape.
He's Turron Davenport, and you can check him out at @TDavenport_NFL on Twitter for all of his coverage of the Eagles from the USA Today on Twitter. Thanks, bud.
All right, you got it.